Hello, and welcome to this day in history for December 20th. December 20th is the 354th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 11 days remaining until the end of the year. Today's word is juxtapose. Juxtapose is a verb which means to place side by side for comparison or contrast. The etymology of this word is a back formation from juxtaposition, from Latin juxta, which means near or next, and French poser, to place. Ultimately, from the Indo-European root yug, to join, which is also the ancestor of junction, yoke, yoga, adjust, enjoin, junta, junto, syzygy, jugular, jugulate, subjugate, zeugma, and rejoinder. The earliest documented use of juxtapose is 1851. Now, before we go on, I want to remind you that links to my research are included in the show notes. So if you're wondering where I got this or that, you can find the links right there in the show notes. And with that, we're going to start in the year AD 69 with Vespasian, formerly a general under Nero who entered Rome to claim the title of emperor. Sometimes I just like to tell you about things because I like the way they sound. Vespasian. 1606, the Virginia colony loaded 3 ships with settlers and set sail to establish Jamestown, Virginia, the first permanent English settlement in the Americas. 1803, the Louisiana Purchase was completed at a ceremony in New Orleans. The Louisiana Purchase was the acquisition of a territory of Louisiana by the United States from France in 1803 in return for $15 million, or approximately $18 per square mile. In 1836, President Andrew Jackson presented Congress with a treaty he negotiated with Iowa, Sacs, Sioux, Fox, Otoe, and Omaha tribes of the Missouri Territory. In 1860, South Carolina became the first state to attempt to secede from the United States. In 1921, Julius Richard Petri was a German microbiologist who was generally credited with inventing the device known as the Petri dish, which is a shallow, transparent lidded dish that biologists use to culture cells and bacteria. Petri died on this date in 1921 at the age of 69. On this day in 1924, Adolf Hitler was released from Landsberg prison. Now, why was he in prison to be released on this date, you might ask? Well, in 1923, he attempted to seize power in a failed coup in Munich and was imprisoned. While he was in jail, he dictated the first volume of his autobiography and political manifesto, Mein Kampf, which means My Struggle. I have not read this book, but I get the impression that it's kind of a whining narrative on how it's everyone else's fault. If you know different, feel free to set me straight in the comments below. If you have read Mein Kampf, I would appreciate your take on it. In 1941, in one of his first acts as the new commander-in-chief in the German army, Adolf Hitler informed General Franz Halder that there would be no retreating from the Russian front near Moscow. The will to hold out must be brought home to every unit. Halder was also informed that he could stay on as chief of the General Army Staff if he so chose, but only with the understanding that Hitler alone was in charge of the Army's movements and strategies. 1946, the popular Christmas film It's a Wonderful Life was first released in New York City. 1957, Elvis Presley was drafted. He was spending Christmas holidays at Graceland, his newly purchased Tennessee mansion, when he received his draft notice for the United States Army. 1960, the National Liberation Front was formed. This was North Vietnam announcing the formation of this National Front. In 1963, they opened the Berlin Wall for a little bit, more than 2 years after it had been constructed by East Germany to prevent its citizens from fleeing its communist regime. Nearly 4,000 West Berliners were allowed to cross into East Berlin to visit relatives. They weren't letting any of the captives out, though. In 1968, the Zodiac killer killed Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday in Vallejo, California. Although the Zodiac claimed to have committed 37 murders and letters to the newspapers, only 7 have been confirmed to have been his victims, and these were the first 2. In 1968, American novelist and short story writer John Steinbeck died on this date. He wrote such novels as Of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, East of Eden. He won a Pulitzer Prize for fiction in 1940 and a Nobel Prize for literature in 1962. He was 66. I heard a funny story about John Steinbeck one time. When he would travel to foreign countries, he liked to go into bookstores. He liked to go into local bookstores and ask them if they had copies of his titles. And one time I think he was in Japan, and he went into a bookstore and had the interpreter ask them if they had any of the books by the American novelist John Steinbeck. And they were so excited and happy to say, "Oh, yes, we have the Angry Raisins." In 1989, the U.S. invaded Panama in an attempt to overthrow military dictator Manuel Noriega. In 2007, Elizabeth II became the oldest monarch of the United Kingdom, surpassing Queen Victoria, who lived for 81 years, 7 months, and 29 days. Elizabeth's birthday is in April, and we'll certainly mention her again when that rolls around. But as I read this, in December of 2019, she is currently 93 years old. And I think that's going to do it for us today. As always, links to my research are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share. And while you're here, check out my other channel, 8 Susquehanna. There's a link to that in the show notes as well. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Alrighty, back to work. Okie dokie, Smokey. Let's just rearrange that a little bit. Just read it like it's written. That's not the way I like to tell it anyway. We don't need all those words. Hope I pronounced that right. So happy for editing. So many edits. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? She's not a man. Did I do this whole thing without a microphone? Dadgummit. This is why I don't do live shows.